So we're picking up again, and let's start our second part of the class. We talked about timing, and before we move into the practical details, I wanted to share with you a couple websites. This one's called Q&A with a Missionary. What was the name of the site itself? MissionaryAsk.com or Ask a Missionary?
Ask a Missionary.
AskAmissionary.com. Sorry, I don't have it written on my notes. This is a website that is done in general, so just like anything else, chew on the meat, spit out the bones. Some of it could be totally wacky, but most of it's going to be really good. This is a generic site where everybody can kind of contribute to it. So you can go on here and say, what's it like to be an American living in North Africa and trying to reach Muslims? And you might have 50 articles just on that. So it's a centralized place for you to get your questions asked. Some of them are going to be totally off. Most of them will be awesome. Then the next one is based in Calvary Chapel. This is called Calvary Missions Resources Connection. And I am so sorry, I just copy and pasted this off the website. I don't know the exact link, but I will put that on our school website, the exact link for this. And this is something that you can get from Calvary Chapel Costa Mesa or calvarychapel.com. And this is done by a former Calvary Chapel missionary that came off of the field and thought, what if before I went, I had the resources that I needed instead of getting there and realizing how much I don't know. So this is a place where the missionary themselves can go on and see these whole series of questions. I'll just read them off. This one's actually for the sender. Books and magazines about being a sender, creating a member care team, member websites, all of the different things about being a sender. And then the other half of the website, so one half is for the sender, the other half is for those that are going. For those that are going, let me just see if I can see this, it's kind of small. General travel information, missions preparation, which would be what we're doing now, missions resources, further training, further books, articles, practical resources, just tons of things. And as you click on those, just pages will open up of other things. And so just become familiar with it. Click through it, see what's there. Saving Grace World Missions is on there, by the way. And somehow it got put on there. I don't know how, but that's where it ended up with. So there's 3 different websites that you can go to that can help you either send or go very well. All right, and I'm recording here. All right, Mike. So we wanted to talk about 6 aspects of a missionary care team. In these 6 aspects, I think our first one was going to be the Theology of Missions, and then we were going to talk about financial support, moral support, logistical support, prayer support, and then finally re-entry. And so with these 6 aspects, Mike, was there a common phrase that you and I kept coming up with as we talked about this?
You're referring to out of sight, out of mind?
Yes, I think so, yeah.
This goes back to our communication. And here's just over the past, 15 years of doing this, missionaries that communicate well and effectively, because you can communicate and send out mailers as much as you want, but it might not be the most effective. Missionaries that communicate well and effectively are, again, generally speaking, well supported, well prayed for, well connected, because they're doing their job. Missionaries that don't communicate regularly or effectively, I see their support always just trickling down or trickling in. We've had missionaries, and when I also say communicate effectively, and that's really the key, because we'll have one missionary that writes an update letter. And it's a solid paragraph with a couple pictures, real short, because that's how people, you go to Facebook and you just see text, you're scrolling right past that baby, right? It's just like, or you see a picture and you're like, oh, what's the picture? You see a video, but the video is 5 minutes. I ain't got that kind of time, but it's 30 seconds. Oh, I'm gonna click that. You said you keep it a minute, and people will watch those. You get into 3-4 minutes, and, I'm going to invest the next 30 seconds of my existence to watching your video, and that's probably going to be about it. But that's also just knowing our culture, the state of how to communicate, so we communicate effectively. So missionaries that I observe that do that well, And often they're communicating regularly, like weekly, daily. On Facebook they're posting a picture and stuff like that.
At least once a week.
At least once a week, and just keeping people informed about what they're doing. It doesn't have to be major. Probably took them all of a minute and a half to do it. Take a picture, post it on Facebook's. Very little what we would call micro blogging.
Like Twitter.
Twitter, yeah, exactly. And then we have another missionary that he doesn't do monthly update letters, but he does quarterly, and they're like 6 pages long, and it's kind of like reading a DMV manual. It's just like, oh, you're just falling asleep. It's just like torturous to get through because it's just so detailed. It's good, but it's so detailed, so like every single detail of their life, and it's just, and you watch their open rate, which is like what you're talking about. You might send out 1,000 emails and 100 get opened. That's good. Their open rate's like 2 get open, right? It's not the effective way to communicate.
And who opens them? Mom and dad.
Mom and dad, and that's usually about it. And their own self, because they check the email, right? And so I always tell missionaries, it's not just that you communicate, it's that you communicate well and effectively and know the state of your culture. And you watch the technology. And I remember as a church, amongst the staff, I'm one of the younger ones. And I remember when social media was just coming out, I told the staff, like, hey, we need to jump on this. And just persecution got dumped. Trent was one of them.
Senior pastor.
So this is being recorded, right?
Yeah.
And it's, that's a fad, it's going to go away. It's not, and we need to get on it. And now it's the primary communication source of our world. Everything is getting posted. You're finding out instant information. And for a gospel tool, it's an amazing thing.
Pastor Trent said the other day, he said, I love all my missionaries, but I only read the ones that communicate well and communicate often.
Yeah.
The other ones, I just don't read them because they never really say anything.
Yeah.
And he goes, I love them. And then he said, and my money, personally, like tithing to a missionary, goes to those that communicate well.
Yeah.
And he goes, even though I know they get more money than anybody else because he sees the books on the backside of the financial side, he goes, they deserve it.
Yeah.
They communicate well. They get my money personally.
Yeah. And so communication it's just key.
Right.
In being a missionary, that's key, and you have to be good at it.
Just before we move, let me reiterate one thing. What we've learned is that a 1-minute video is engaging. People hear it, they see it, they want to watch it. If it's more than a minute, don't even post it. If it's 30 seconds, you got to really be really good to say anything in 30 seconds. So 1 minute's a good timing. But if I was to write out that updated just text and send it out, nobody would open it because they would see a page of text. But they see a little box with moving pictures, and it's like we're little kids.
Yeah.
Ooh, that looks interesting.
Yeah, it's
I'll watch
shiny.
that, but I'm not going to read anything. That's just the state of our culture.
It is.
So out of sight, out of mind is what we're talking about.
Oh, yes. Yeah, out of sight, and that's just the reality. People's lives move on here, just as your life's moving on. And I always tell the missionary, you're at fault. It's your fault. You're the missionary. You're responsible for it. Now, when I'm talking to a pastor, I'm going to tell the pastor, it's your fault. You're their pastor. You need to be reaching out. You need to be picking up the phone call and calling them. So I'm going to play both sides of that.
And in war, we would say the same thing.
Yeah.
Soldier, it's your job. Commanding officer, it's your job. We're all in this together.
Yeah. And so when it comes to like writing an update letter or communicating, I always tell missionaries, they're like, well, how do I do that? I always say, okay, get a sticky note, whatever piece of paper, write down the top 5 things that you did this month that you would want to tell people about. And, really think through it, pray through it and stuff, and then cross all but 2 of them out. And what? Yeah, cross all but 2 of them out and only write a short little paragraph about those top 2. And that's it. And those are the things you're going to communicate. Maybe you could communicate about a third one in a week from now, just put another little thing together. But you're not going to communicate everything you've done in your life. That's not the goal. It's to communicate the most this is going to sound horrible, but the most appealing stories.
Sure.
Letting people know this is what's going on.
Ones that connect.
Ones that's going to connect with people, and you don't need to communicate everything. And that just relieves a lot of burden from the missionary, because a lot of times they feel like, I have to say everything I did. No, you don't. Just share a couple things that you did, and make it entertaining. I mean, for the make people want to click it.
So Mike had said it takes a couple minutes. So for some people, they can do it. My wife can post. She can find a photo and attach a little text and post it within like 2 minutes. For me, 2-3 hours minimum. It's just our skill level. When I'm doing a video, it takes me all day. So from the time I get up and pray about what I want to say, get out the tripod, go to wherever it is I'm going to shoot the video, because it's got to be quiet. You can't have a bunch of background noise. You got to have the right lighting. And it doesn't have to be perfect, right? But you got an iPhone, you can do it. iPhones rule the world, no doubt. So a portable tripod on an iPhone, you can do it. I normally take about 40 takes on my 1 minute video before I say that's the one I'm going to send out. So like the other day, I was in this forest area up behind the church up in the redwoods. I went up in their forest area because I knew it was quiet and all this stuff and the lighting was right. And there was a guy about 100 feet away. And I'm like, man, he's killing me. If he could just go away and not hear me say the same thing over and over and over. And then I realized, a minute and 30 seconds in, I haven't even got to my main point. All right, delete, right? And start again, and start again, and start again. Sometimes it takes, so I might be there for an hour, right? But when you see it on Facebook, it's a 1 minute clip. But there might be 5 or 6 hours behind that, which really it's a whole day. Pray about it, you get up, you set up, then you trim it down, then you post it, and then you might write something here, and then you have to do Instagram and Twitter and Facebook and the whole thing. So to me, it's a 1 day thing.
And it's time well spent.
Oh, it's essential. It's got to be done. Now, all that said, what we're talking about tonight is the job of the missionary. You're already giving up your life, moving to a foreign country, learning a new culture, learning a new language, acclimating to a whole new style of life, and now you're responsible to tell everybody else about it in a way that they'll connect to it on their end. The job of the missionary, as Wes Bentley told us, Wes said, I work 60-hour weeks. Do you remember him saying that? Wes said, I work 60-hour weeks. And that's what it takes to get this job done. A lot of times that's what we do. This isn't a relaxing thing. Now we want to be relaxed. We want to walk in the Spirit. We don't want to be stressed out. But this is not an easy thing. Communicating, connecting. For Amy Carmichael to write 8 books in her crippled bed in India in the sweltering temperatures, that wasn't an easy thing. But praise the Lord, she did. She affected millions to go on the mission field, even us today. All right, so just a concept on some of the aspects of being a missionary. The first one that, Mike, you wanted to bring up was the Theology of Missions. Talk to us about the basic motivation for us to go on the mission field.
Yeah, what we were talking about earlier was most of the time what starts us in missions is an emotional appeal. Right, I saw some starving kids in Haiti, right, on a picture from a presentation. I got to go help them, right? That's great. The emotional appeal is awesome. For me, it was I think you or Trent had brought up like somebody, Gary Kusunoki had brought somebody from Sudan, and that was what God
the daughter
really
that he adopted. She had a shot in the leg.
Is that what it was?
Dying,
yeah, it was forever ago.
And he hyped her out, and he brought her, and I met her in person, and she still had the bandage on her leg. Half of her leg got blown out. She lost all of her family.
And that's where God started stirring up in me to go to Uganda, and a lot of missionaries I talk to, it's an emotional thing. And that's okay, but I recognize emotions are going to wear out. And if you go there, well, because the people are dying. Yeah, and that's going to be true after you get there too. And you're going to realize you're going to have very little, to be able to provide for them. And then you're going to get there and the people aren't going to like you. They're going to steal from you. They're going to, it's just, and they don't want you there. And you're like, but I came for you. And all of a sudden those emotions start to die down, and you're going to come home. Right? Because you're just broken. You're like, my whole mission's existence is shattered because it was good motivation, but it was the wrong foundation.
Let me bring up another issue as a missions pastor we ran into. Over 1 billion people today on the planet live on less than $1 a day. And that's for families, not just one person. 1 billion people. So where's the greatest need? Because when you go around and you look at the world, and as we've traveled as missions pastors, where's the greatest need? It's endless.
Yeah.
It's endless. 1 billion people, that's 3 times the population of America as a whole, are almost starving to death on a daily basis, a lot of them living in garbage dumps. So where does that compassion start?
Yeah.
Right? And do we jump from one place to another? Or does God call us to a unique place and to really give our lives for a group of people long term?
Yeah.
So the emotions are fading.
And the flip side of that is emotions are good. We want to love the people. We want to weep with them when their kids are dying and they're living in trash heaps, and because that's God's heart. That's not God's intention, for these people. It's not what He created us for.
It's a good Samaritan.
And His heart breaks for them too, and our heart should be tender for them. And as missionaries, you have to fight against just getting bitter and jaded towards these people. I shared a story. In Uganda, we had our compound, and we would hire people just to come and do tasks because we wanted to provide people jobs and those type of things. And we had a lady that would come and clean around the compound and stuff. And she stole $100 out of my desk. And I just, of course, I hit level 10, right? Like, this is unjust, and then we need to put her on trial and expose her of her sin. And, I'm so bitter.
No, remember, Mike's going through culture shock too.
Yeah.
He wouldn't have done this the first day. You live there for 6 months, you start thinking this way.
And this is a person we're paying you, we love you. I love she had a little daughter that would run around and play, and we'd buy her clothes. We're here to help, and exactly. And you stole from me. So as an American, you just kind of we're crying out for justice, call the police. And I approached the guards and our national leadership to tell them, hey, this $100 got stolen. And I was really upset, I was okay, but I was upset, And they're like, okay, hold on. We can't go tell everybody about this. And they just so gently rebuked me in a Ugandan way, because what they found most important was the relationship, was the individual, not the justice. Right? As an American, I value task, right? Mm-hmm. And the task is, well, we gotta, this can't happen. They're like, no, if we do this, that person will be destroyed in the community.
Reputation.
Reputation, it will be detrimental for her. So the worst thing we could do for her is expose her of this, and it so gently changed my perspective of that as a missionary, I'm not here to destroy people. And then I clicked into the theology aspect, and this is what the foundation.
But tell us, does that mean that they get away with that sin?
No.
So they're still dealt with, but not in the Western, black and white, I want justice way.
Yeah, and that's where the theology clicked in of oh, well, no, of course this person stole. She's not born again. She's living in a tukul. $100 is enough money to feed her kid for a year.
At least.
And so, to me, $100 was a lot, but it's not like the end of the world. I'm going to be okay. To her, that's like finding a lottery ticket, a winning lottery ticket. So it's okay, but then it's her salvation, her soul now became the most important. So now it's not personal attack upon me. It's now I'm viewing this in a biblical light. It's her soul is dead, right? That's all she knows. Of course she stole from me, right? She has no conscience in that biblical sense. There's no awakening there. She's just in survival. And then now compassion came in. You see, that's the difference between being emotionally driven and versus having a clear biblical mindset of why I'm going to do missions. Sure, I'm gonna help people. We're gonna feed some people. We're gonna do some good, right? That we want to do that because a lot of times that's a springboard into the gospel. But I'm going because what these people need more than clean water and a plate of food is they need Jesus Christ. What has so destroyed and torn apart their culture to such a state of depravity is because they don't know God. Right? So I'm going to go there and I'm going to help out with the chief need. I'm going to aim at that bullseye because it's the only thing that's going to change and affect their culture for good. They keep killing each other. Well, why? Well, because they're steeped in sin. They don't know that murder's wrong. Right? So what am I going to do? Hey, stop killing it. That's not going to work. They're just going to kill me. Right? But I'm going to go and I'm going to start preaching the gospel to them. Right? And now my motivation is this is actually what's going to help. And I'm there now in a theological sense. I'm like, what these people need is God. And they're worshiping the devil. You know, they're worshiping, and God's not being glorified here. If you've read John Piper's book, Let the Nations Be Glad, his whole premise is missions exist because worship doesn't. I'm passionate because my king is not being glorified in that place, and I'm not okay with that because God is so worthy of worship. So I'm going to go there and be like, guys, worship the king, right? And so now my biblical theology is now shaping my emotions that are going to be carried out, and then it also is the foundation of my success there. Like I said, I no longer want to crucify this lady for stealing $100. That in reality cost me nothing. I mean, it affected me not at all.
Right.
Practically speaking, it hurt my heart because she's a friend, and I felt personally attacked. I felt violated, and those are fine. But you know what? Get over it.
Yeah.
And now I shift to, she needs the gospel, right? And that heart of that's why I'm there. And if you don't have that perspective, you're going to come home. You're going to be bitter. You're going to fail as a missionary, and you're just going to fail as a missionary. Now, of course, you're going to have times of ups and downs of you're going to forget that because you're going to get in the flesh too. But you come back to, why I'm here is because I'm being obedient to my King. I'm fulfilling the Great Commission. I'm giving these people what they need the most, is the gospel of Jesus Christ. And where I can, I'm plugging some holes, for the sake of the gospel. I'm passing out a cup of water in Jesus. I'm doing those things.
Hospitals, schools, wells.
Yeah, but I'm doing
side issues.
So that I can bring the gospel in. That's my ultimate aim. And there's some mission. I think you guys have talked about this, or going to talk about the balance between social justice and the gospel. And some missionaries get completely off balance, and they just do practical stuff. There's a philosophy now of we don't preach the gospel. We just smile at people and wait for the man of peace to come out. And we just, we do tie-dye shirts. And it's like, no, we're there to do good. We're there to preach the gospel. And the gospel is chief, period. You could pass out cold water till you're blue in the face and send the people straight to hell still. Yeah. You're just prolonging their inevitable.
Large aid agencies, that's all they do.
Yeah.
They prolong their lives just for a couple of years.
Yeah.
Now, do you find that this kind of a thing happens early on in their missions time? Does it happen like the first 2 years, the 10 years, the 20 years? Well, when should we be most aware of this hitting us without us knowing it? Like, when are most missionaries sideswiped by the reality that they're all emotion and their missions theology is low?
Usually very quickly after getting to the mission field.
Okay.
Because
give us some timing in that.
Within the first year.
Okay.
Because you're there. You guys have talked through the swings of culture shock, and you're in the honeymoon stage. Everybody's great. I had a friend just come back from Uganda, and she talks about how loving the people are. And I'm like, they are loving, but they're loving because they're hoping to get something from you. And you don't realize that because you were just there for 2 weeks.
Yeah. And if they did steal, it was no big deal.
Yeah, and they would rob you blind if you could. And that's the reality. And you come back, you're all excited about how loving they are, and you're bitter at these Americans because you guys are just so pagan with your Starbucks and, and it's like, okay, hold on. The honeymoon will come over, but you're going to get hit with that reality of you're basing it off emotion. these people are sinners just like the people are in America.
Right.
They're not any better. They have some redeemable things in their culture, just as we have some redeemable things. That's a whole different.
And that's what we're searching for.
That's a whole different thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
The man of peace and redemptive qualities.
Yeah,
Yes.
and there are redemptive qualities. There are good things. They are more people-oriented, which we definitely need in America, because we could care less about people. Just as long as you don't affect my life, we're at peace. But the moment you start becoming a burden to me, we're over. That's the American culture. The other side, they're going to bend over backwards because you're part of our tribe. What affects you affects me, and they realize that. That's a redeemable thing. And so the missionary is going to get smacked in the face with it, usually within the first year.
Okay.
And that's where it's going to be either you're going to make it or not.
So it's a make or break.
Yeah.
Yeah, and these are crucial moments.
Yeah, for sure. It's a
Right.
defining factor.
Now, yes, go ahead. Question.
Well, I just have a question because as a short-term missionary going into a ministry, and we're learning this in our book about you hire, I didn't even think about it, that you can hire nationals and they won't be believers. I think when I first went in, I thought, oh, of course they hired believers. But then you learn they're not.
What if they're not reached?
believers.
Yeah, and they might be believers, but they're first generation believers. They're coming from a culture where it's okay to lie and steal.
In Haiti, they might be mixing it with more witchcraft than the gospel altogether. So they've synchronized the gospel to the point
Yeah.
where only 10% of what's in their heart is truly a believer.
Yeah.
And I've seen that working with the nationals and doing Bible study with them and seeing their lack of experience or understanding of what that looks like, and them wanting to give you, their desire is to give you a response that they think you're looking for.
Yeah.
And you see that, that effort, and then you see that disconnect. So it takes time to develop that. And then seeing, so there was a missionary, or a worker who got taken out of the ministry for, falling into sin.
Okay.
And I was just there with him and sat with him, and my heart just broke. He was broken. And so we just prayed together, and he just said, I just need you to talk to me. I just need you to listen to me, because, everybody stopped talking to me, and he was just so broken. In the end of that day, he said, I want to recommit my life to Christ because I know I need to do this. Not because you're telling me to do this, because I need it. And it was a beautiful kind of step towards reconciliation.
Right.
But I think as a short-termer, and you want to be careful, like in our chapters learning about leadership, they know what they're doing with the nationals.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Right.
So I don't want to be quick to say what the ministry did or didn't do. And I think that it was just a valuable experience.
Yeah, that's good.
And like Mike is saying, when he had this issue, you asked the nationals, how should we proceed with this staff and this person and all
And
that?
I submitted to them,
Right.
because that's the wisest thing to do, is the people that are there. You got to trust the leadership on the ground. And for example, here's more kind of an example like that is we've had people come to Uganda. We're there, and they do an evangelistic crusade, and they get up on the stage and they share the gospel, and they say, if you'd like to receive Jesus, raise your hand. And everybody's like, and everybody, 100% people raise their hand, and they write in their newsletter, 300 people gave their lives to No, they're a save-face culture, and you said raise your hand, and they want you to be happy. They want you to be comfortable, so you're asking them to raise, so they raised their hand. They didn't make a decision at all. But as a short-termer, we're like, God's doing a revival. As a long-termer, you're like, you don't understand the cultural aspect of those things. And so you trust the long-term missionary, trust the nationals in all of those type of things. Because again, the emotional now, it's like, 100 people gave their lives to the Lord. And then you start to realize, you're like, no, they didn't. They're still fully unsaved.
Maybe one or two.
Maybe one or two, did that. And
So tell us, Mike, about the balance between, because we always have to find that, striking that balance. You've got the passion in your emotions, and then you have the biblical mandate to preach the gospel. Where's the balance in that?
that is one of the hardest things to strike,
Okay.
because the people, they're going to rob from you. they're not going to like you. They're going to make fun of you. They're going to, whether it's malicious or not. I mean, I've had friends, like, they just make fun of you because you say you're trying to learn a language, and they're laughing at you because you're saying that totally wrong, and you're fully offended, and you don't realize they love the fact that you're trying to speak their language, and that just ministered love to them, but you're fully offended because they're laughing at you, and bitterness creeps in. And that's one of the cycles of the culture shock is you will get bitter. And the key is you have to pray yourself to life again. Like, you have to spend so much time in prayer, because you need to replace your heart with God's heart. Because your heart, just like my heart, is a heart of flesh and stubbornness, and it's all about me and all those things. And you start like, Lord, give me your eyes. And that's where you have to strike that balance between the theology and emotion, because then God's going to now start to awaken your affections for the people. He's going to start to give you His love for the people, and that's what you want. And now it's not going to be a superficial love. Okay. It's not going to be this American love, well, as long as you're blessing me, I'll bless you. It's going to be unconditional. It's going to be, I'm going to be able to turn my cheek and say, hit the other one, because that's now God's heart, and that's hard, and you're going to fail, and you're going to see, like, it's an ongoing process of missions.
Like the point that Stephen got to, Lord, forgive them, as they were killing him. Yeah, he understood the big picture.
Yep.
So can you get to a point where you have no emotions at all? Is that safe?
No.
Because as a guy, that's what we want to do.
For sure.
Right. This is the mandate. This is the task. This is what we're going to do. Get out of my way. I don't care about feelings anymore.
And a lot of times it's defense. It's a defense mechanism. Like, we're in Africa, where Rob and I were in Uganda, we dealt with dead bodies all the time. And part of the biggest frustration was these were dead people that really didn't have to die. They died of issues because they didn't have soap. They just didn't have basic hygiene. So the little baby, he died because he got a rash, and then they went to and you try to, it's like a defense. You try to get so cold towards them because you can't deal with the pain anymore. It's just that reality, and you have to fight against that. And that's where that prayer comes out of, like, I need to wait. Like, I need to weep with these people and for them. Okay. Right? Like, because that's really the heart. Like, I need to, like, I'm here. I got to intercede. I got to stand in the gap. Right? I got to be the one that runs out as the plague's going forth and standing between the living and the dead. Right? That's what we're talking about. But if you don't fight for that heart and really fight for it, you're not going to make it. And this all sounds like super, like, that's kind of out there, but that is missions. And you will become bitter at the people. You will at times hate their guts, the people that God has called you to go reach. And you're going to be ministering to missionaries that are in that. And you're going to be like, how could you, and it's like, oh no, they're just people. And they're dealing with so much pressure and so much issues that you don't know of. They're dealing with it, and God's got to awaken their heart and awaken their emotions for the people, and break down those defensive walls. And you have to learn, in a sense, you have to learn to cry, or else you're not going to make it. In Africa, they laugh. You say somebody died, they start laughing, and you're like, what's wrong with you? When you realize they have, what other option is there? They're dealing with death so much that they have to make light of it. Where to us, death is so foreign, to all of us. We go to a funeral once every, like, very rarely.
5 years.
They go to funerals daily. At that time in Uganda, 50% mortality rate with kids was probably a good.
It's still the same in South Sudan now.
And in the bush, it's probably going to be even higher. And that's just the reality. We have 1 million people
starving. Like, literally on the brink of starvation. They could die within days. 1 million people.
And you're going to go there and you're going to watch them die. And that's just the reality of it. And you have to defend yourself against bitterness towards them, or building a wall to protect your own heart. And then also in the context of, like, reverse culture shock, which we're going to talk about, probably not because we're not going to get there, but in reentry team is then you're going to also have a tendency to be bitter towards your church, towards your family, your friends, who have no clue what you went through, who have no link whatsoever to relate to you with. And you're gonna be so upset with them, like, don't you know there's people dying and of starvation, and you're sitting there eating the Carl's Jr. whatever, and that's just, you got to process those emotions. You got to pray through them, and
I was in a meeting the other day, about 50 pastors, and I was talking to a couple pastors on the side at the end of the meeting, and I had mentioned to them, over 1 billion people that are dying without the gospel. Over 1 billion. Could grasp that number for a moment. 1 billion. And he's like, yeah, whatever, God's going to work it out. I actually got angry. Yeah. And I had to check myself. And I'm all, you know what? This isn't the time. I wanted to physically fight this pastor in the back of the Calvary Chapel prayer breakfast, because he was like, it's no big deal, Rob. I don't know why you worry about that stuff. God's going to work it out. Right? I'm like lost, clueless senior pastor. Yeah. He's a great guy.
Yeah.
He's a great
loves
teacher.
Jesus.
Yeah, loves Jesus. Yeah, I wanted to be jaded. Yeah. And I realized he's never seen what I've seen.
Yeah.
And I didn't have this conviction until I saw what I saw. And we don't have these convictions until we experience and we do the things that we do. So we can't come back and try to throw it on somebody else. All right, so just for the sake of time, let's move from the Theology of Missions, which is entire books and entire semesters of concepts, to financial support. So when we're talking about financial support, we know in Calvary we say God guides, God provides. Well, what are some of the things that we can think about with financial support?
It starts off with, if you don't have the financial support, you're not going to the mission field, first and foremost.
Right.
And when I sit down to talk to missionaries, I always talk about developing your conviction towards raising support. And where that balance is, because you have organizations that are highly business oriented. They're nothing more than just Christian salesmen, whoever's hand they shake, they put a prayer card in, type thing, and it's just, you're a potential donor, and that's how I'm going to treat you. And if you ever view people like that as a missionary, please step down and stop doing what you're doing.
It's all pressure.
Because you're not looking at people as dollar signs and not as partners, as fellow Christians, and that's just wrong. Right. And I've seen organizations. There's one organization that if I said the name, you'd recognize it. They actually encourage their missionaries to change churches every few years, because you've now tapped out that donor base, and so now you need to move on.
You need a bigger pool to
You need another pool, because you're going to have donors come on and drop off, and you want to I've wiped that organization off my list of ever being interested, just because I'm like, that's so wicked. It's so not Bible heart. These churches are not just your donor base. Then you have the complete other side, where, and a lot of Calvary chapels fall into this model of I'm never talking about money at all. It's just wicked, and I'm going to have faith, and God's going to provide, and I'm going to pray, and there's going to be groceries on my doorstep, and we say we're going to George Mueller it up, right? You have those two extremes, and finding where, I think both of those extremes are wrong. I think Paul in the New Testament, you read the book of Philippians. Did Trent talk about this at all?
A little bit, yes. The partnership.
The book of Philippians, it's the support. He's thanking this church. Nobody has partnered in the fellowship, in the giving and receiving. Right? Paul the apostle is writing a missionary update letter.
To a church that he planted.
To a church that he planted that's now sending him and supporting him. Right? So he's talking about money. In these things, he's in that context, goods and food,
and he also says it to the Romans. I haven't met you yet, but when I come and see you, I'm going to impart a spiritual gift, and then you're going to send me to Spain so I can
continue
to
send me
preach
to Rome.
the gospel.
And Paul's doing that. So we've got it in our brains. Get out of money is sinful. Asking for money is sinful. There's sinful ways to do that, but look, Piper says, "Go, send, or disobey." And I always love that quote. You're either a goer or you're a sender, or you're going to be in disobedience. Those are the areas you're gonna fall into. And now, as a goer, if you're called to go, you need to come to the grips that God is also calling people to send you, because where God guides, He provides, and so you're prayerfully moving forward in a godly way to raise support. And to encourage people not to support you, but to support the ministry that you're doing. Like, I'm going to come and I'm going to be ministering the gospel. And Paul says, I'm thankful for you and your fellowship in the gospel from the first day till now. And that's what he's talking about. It's this partnership that you and I have had in the ministry of the gospel. And he goes on to say that verse that often we misquote, he who has began a good work and you will be faithful to complete it. That's not talking about salvation, right? He's talking about the work of the gospel. This partnership, as Paul's at that time in prison, but as Paul's ministering the gospel, he's like, we're in fellowship. There's a partnership. There's a koinonia in giving and receiving. It's not just, hey bud, how are you? It's an actual investment, is what he's talking about. And so finances are absolutely essential, in it. And so the first,
and with that, as you had said, out of sight, out of mind. All of the people that we look to for as missionary heroes that said, I'm not going to ask for money, they all communicated what was going on.
Very well.
So everybody knew there was an orphanage, there was kids being left at the temple steps, and people were being rescued, but they never said, this is the budget I want you to pledge.
Yeah.
They just said, this is what's happening in my ministry. So communication without pressure. That's kind of how we say it.
Exactly. They always say, I want to go, I'm doing George Mueller style. And I always ask, have you ever read any of George Mueller's biographies? He communicated very well. We wouldn't have his biographies unless he communicated, because his biographies are, and Hudson Taylor, they're all drafted because the letters they wrote.
Every one of them,
And I always laugh at that because it's a statement of ignorance. Of you've never.
The only one that we can find that didn't communicate was Bruchko, right? Bruce Olson, but he didn't need anything financially because he lived out in the middle of the jungle.
Such a unique
He was totally
situation.
unique. He's the only one I know of that we would.
And he was able to be self-sufficient
because he was in the middle of a jungle, and they were headhunters, and nobody could go or come and have. There was no need for actual physical money at all. So the question that I had is, let's say I come to you and I say, I have a business, I have a young family, I own a home. Should I just sell everything I have, cash out, go liquid, and then take it overseas and support myself? Or should I actually create this, we call it holding the rope. Should I create the rope, or should I just throw the rope aside and say, I've got the money, I'm on my own, I'm a lone ranger?
Yeah, I always counsel against that every single time, because one, you're not going to be successful long term. That money will dry up. And now you're going to have nothing. And now you're going to come back and you're going to call me on the phone and I have nothing. Help me do this right. And that's where you're going to be. Two, you're also not allowing the body of Christ to fulfill their calling in sending you. In this partnership of the gospel is a lot of times from good motivation, good heart, well done, go sell everything you have and you're willing to do that you pass that test. But a lot of times, you know what you're doing, it's a lack of faith, because you don't believe God's going to raise up people to support you and to take care of you. Now, there's a lot of things. Yeah, we're going to liquidate, sell the cars, sell those things. If a person has a house, I usually encourage them, well, let's find a management to rent that house out, because that could be a great income for you. Also gives you, because retirement is good. It's not a sinful thing to plan for retirement, and you're probably not going to go and die on the mission field of old age. You're going to need to come back, and it's good to plan ahead. So if you have a house, great, keep it. Assuming the Lord's just fully moving and convincing everybody you need to ditch this thing, because I've had missionaries that a house is just a money pit, and you absolutely need to get rid of that thing. But usually I'm like, no, you keep that. That's wise. It's just we're being wise stewards. That's what we're doing, and we're going to allow the body of Christ to be the body of Christ, and assuming that house isn't going to suck a financial burden upon your supporters and stuff like that, great, keep it. If you need to sell the house and maybe just purchase a little condo or something like that, that's great too. Just as long as it's not a financial burden, it's actually a financial positive positive, then keep the house.
Yeah, we've seen older couples that have raised their kids, had the 5-6 bedroom house, downsized to a 2-bedroom condo, enough for them to have a place and a place for their grandkids,
Yeah.
and then that's how they simplified. And that was a good, wise investment.
Yeah, amen.
Okay. Questions? With raising support, talk to us about a budget. What's an average monthly budget? Now, I know that's hard from Africa to Asia to Europe to all over. What's just the average amount of U.S. dollars it takes to put a few people, a single guy,
say a family,
a small
with 2 kids.
family on the field per month?
Again, that's a hard question to ask, because if you're going to England, the cost is going to be $5,000 or $6,000. You're going to Africa per month.
Yeah.
You're going to Africa, you could probably survive off of. You could survive in Africa off of $1,000 a month, but we're going to set your budget around $3,500 a month.
Yeah.
And I was actually just talking to a couple
your kids
today.
get sick. That's over. Yeah.
I was talking to a couple today, and they're in Africa, and the budget they put, and then they kept telling me, but yeah, we also got to raise like one-time expenses like plane tickets and visa costs and stuff like that. And I go, well, hold on. You realize those aren't one-time expenses, right? Those are on, because you're going to come home again, right? You're going to need to renew your visa again, right? Those are all expenses you need to include in your monthly budget. And this is where a lot of times missionaries get really bitter at me, because I've had missionaries come to me and tell me, we're going to survive in Europe off of $1,500 a month with a family of 5. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Right? No, you're not. Like, you know, they're like, no, it's cool. A flat, it costs about $400 a month in rent. And I'm like, no, it doesn't. And your visa expenses, what are you getting into? Like, what?
And a lot of those countries require a limited amount before you even enter in.
Yeah, for sure. They're not going to let you come and be a burden on them.
Yeah. So let's just say $3,500.
Yeah.
Just across the board.
That's a good round number.
$3,500 a month. And I'm trying to raise that much. So let's say I raise the initial sending cost, the initial plane tickets, the initial stuff, and then in our book, just a sidelight, in our book we talked about this week about people loading shipping containers full of gear and sending it overseas. Those days are over, guys. Don't even think that way. You get on the plane and maybe you have a couple 100-pound total. So you have 50 pounds, 2 50-pound tubs per person. That's how we've moved.
Yeah.
So my entire family moved to Sri Lanka with 500 pounds. And that was like toys and diapers and the basic stuff. That's all you need. When you get there, you need cash to be normal, right? Buy normal stuff in a normal house and a normal way to live. So let's say I'm raising that sending out cost, not a shipping container, but what I need for plane tickets and basic setup. I remember my landlord wanted 1 year's rent in advance. He wanted $1,000 a month in advance. I'm like, you want me to give you $12,000 up front? Can't do it, bro. Sorry.
Yeah.
But his wife fell in love with my 6-month-old baby, and they said, great, give us 3 months in advance. I'm like, well, that's still $3,000. Praise the Lord, God provided for that.
Yeah.
So I raised that money to get me on the plane, to get me over there, to get me into a house when I arrived, so I'm not living out in the open field. At what point do you allow me to go in that raising of funds? Do I have to have all of it? Do I have to have more of it? Or what's that look like practically?
So what we do when we help establish a budget, we figure out what is the living cost that'll put you at 0 each month. Meaning you're able to pay rent, put food on the table, and gas in a car. You know, whatever those basic, you're going to survive. And you're going to have like $1.50 left in your bank account at the month. And we say that's 80%, right? And so once you reach 80%, you're free to go. 80%, and why we say it's not your goal. Now, every missionary I talk to, that's their 100%, because support raising is a daunting task, and if they can get away with $2,500 a month, that's a lot easier than the $3,500 a month they actually need. And so I say, well, 80% is fine. You're going to be okay. You're going to be able to survive and pay your rent and do ministry. And then also, as one of the most frustrating thing with support raising is, and I talk to this about missionaries all the time, is you have to realize there's going to be people that are going to say, yeah, I'll support you when you get there. And what I always tell them is, when you hear that, in a very graceful way, say, I'll say it bluntly here, but tell them, well, you can't get there until you have support. right? And most people, they've never even contemplated that reality. They don't even think about it. And then once they hear that, they're like, oh, I never even thought about that. Okay, where do I sign up? Like, I want to see you get there, and if I could, and it's mostly, it's a little education, not rude, not, those type of things, and they hear that, they support. And then, but some people are just gonna be like, no, I'm gonna support you when you get there. I'm gonna wait and see how it goes, and see if you're an investment that I wanna make an investment in.
And do you feel that we've seen a lot of passionate people go out short term without any preparation, planning, finances, and they have these grand plans. They last about a month, they come home. So we as senders sometimes get a little jaded. I'm not going to start investing money in this person unless I know they're serious.
Exactly.
So I want to see him get there. So everybody's kind of stuck in this middle ground of uncertainty.
And the worst thing you could do as a missionary is paint this grand vision, go over, fail, and come home and now try to do it right. Because now you've destroyed your testimony with people, and they're like, why would I believe in you? Right. Type thing. And your heart was good, your motivation was good, you just lacked wisdom. And I've had to send a lot of missionaries just away because I'm like, you're not willing to yield and go out well, and you're going to be home in 3 months,
right?
If you're lucky,
right.
To make it that long.
And then we had talked about. Okay, go ahead.
Before that 80, why we sit at 80% is because there's those people that once you get to the field, they now click and support, and usually the support starts to bolster once you get there. Now here's the key: you're not done with support raising. Because the support raising is a never-ending task while you're on the mission field. A lot of missionaries get there, they forget about support raising, they forget about communication, and their support now starts to tank and start to drop off, because again, out of sight, out of mind. I've had donors call me, sweet old ladies, call me and they're like, is so-and-so still on the mission field? And I'm like, well, yeah, why would you ask that? Well, I haven't heard from them in 6 months, and so I was just wondering, we support them about $25 a month, and do I need to cancel? And I'm like, hey, could you give me 10 minutes? You're gonna get a phone call from your missionary in about 5 minutes, okay? Just and I'm calling the missionary, they're like, do you know it's 4 o'clock? Dude, I don't care, you're about to get fired. Call this lady and thank her for your support. That is just, you start to think about it. This lady is sacrificially giving to support your ministry, and you have the audacity not to communicate. Get on a plane and come home. That to me, that so breaks the heart of God. Of like, wow, that's not okay. They're your partner, and they're supporting you, and you're not being a good steward of that. And okay, great, you might have a church of 1,000 people, but you're not being a steward of this lady's who's supporting your ministry just by saying thank you, and look what God's doing, and this is fruit to your account. And
we're talking about a Facebook post, you could reach 1,000 people. Yeah. You don't have to call 1,000 people individually.
Yeah, and I actually did call that missionary, woke them up, and made them call that lady.
That's right.
And then I called them back and gave them a gentle rebuking.
A loving
exhortation.
Yeah. So I raise money every week. People come on, people drop off. People come on, people drop off. Wes Bentley is in a church every week. When I asked Wes, I said, Wes, how many weeks are you booked? He said, I'm booked out 100 weeks. I have 2 years in advance already booked to be in churches because my people in South Sudan need it. And if I don't do it, the ministry won't last, because we might get 100 supporters today, and then 20 supporters, they could have been long-term supporters, are going to drop off. So it's this constant thing. It's like, do we go to work every day to keep buying food, to keep paying the rent, to keep putting gas in the car? It's the same thing. This is an ongoing process. All right, so before we conclude this, we talked about raising personal budget. Is there another thing that we're raising money for?
Yeah, and this is the thing that missionaries always forget about, or just don't even think about, because they've never even contemplated. But your personal support, that's just point one. That's to provide for a house for you to live in, and a car for you to drive, right? Now you have to do the ministry. And doing ministry costs money. and you're going to have to raise money to do the work of the ministry. And so task one is to get your personal support, because unless you're there, you're not going to be able to do the ministry. But also task two now is it's also your responsibility to raise funds to support the ministry that you're doing. It's not the responsibility of other people to do that.
Right. Let me make a little side note. If you're in a developed country with developed Christianity, they normally have churches and those people tithe. So money can come from within. But we're going to encourage you not to go to countries that have churches and Christianity. Go to places that have nothing. And so when you start with nothing, you're the one that's got to raise your own as well as for the people. But you're not talking about building big buildings and doing all that. It's just enough. Like, for example, for us in Uganda, in the beginning we were there and we had just enough to survive. And then we noticed all these starving kids. And we're like, what are we going to do? And we prayed about it, and the Lord led us, and it was just something we just developed. He led us, as we tithed together, and we used our personal tithe to then support a feeding center. But it started with like 3 kids. We could afford that between the 4 or 5 missionaries with our 10%. Because you remember, we're getting a paycheck. And we took 10% of our missionary paycheck and we tithed on it. Pastors tithe, missionaries tithe. So we took that 10%, but after 4 or 5 kids, we could no longer buy the expensive food for these starving kids. Then I came back to America and I raised money for those kids. So we weren't just raising it for us. We were raising it for them. And that was a very desperate place. So we had to do more of it because there were no local jobs, right? But if there's a place with a local job, maybe you're raising a little bit to start an income generating project, which then the people then raise the money for themselves. So it's a different scenario, I think, in each place.
And a lot of times it's a little bit easier to raise money for ministries than it is for you personally. Because it's a lot easier for me to say, hey, support these dying kids over here, than, hey, would you support me? Right? And there's also a lot more heart appeal to like, oh, I could support kids in a feeding center, dude. You're going to get just cash dropped on that.
Every Sunday, when I'm at a church, I give them a card at the end of the service and say, if you'd like to support, here are the 5 things. I'll get 20 kids, 1 medical clinic, 1 missionary, and maybe 1 Douglas. But I've been talking to them for 45 minutes, pouring my heart out. 1 person a month goes, yeah, I'll support you, Rob. But 100 will support the kids. It's just normal.
And it's funny because, and we all understand this logically, but if you don't have the support,
the kids don't have anything.
The ministry, now, of course, setting aside sovereignty of God and all that stuff in this, but it's important for you to be there and to be taken care of.
We're in the middle of all of it.
And a lot of times with donors and people within churches, a little education is what's needed, because you could say that and like, you know what, you're absolutely right. It is more valuable to support the ministry in general speaking, or the missionary in that sense, so that they can be there, they can be effective to do the feeding of the kids and the preaching of the gospel and stuff like that.
And it's a lot easier to raise support for others. We had Ebola at one time in our refugee camp, and Ebola is a disease that comes through, and when people get it, if you touch them, physically touch them, the sweat on your hands goes through, or the sweat on their skin, and then Ebola goes through the sweat on your hands, and you liquefy within 72 hours. I mean, we're talking, it's life-threatening. I came home because we had to, we quarantined our little group. When nobody goes out of the compound, or some people are going to go home. I came home, a pastor in Tennessee, out of all places in the world, called me up and said, I heard about what's going on. We didn't ask for money, we just said we have Ebola. He said, come on out. We're doing a building project right now for our church, but we really want to hear about your crisis in Uganda. So he gave me 5 minutes to share on a Sunday morning. We shared, and the church got together and they paid for a doctor for us for 2 years, Dr. Shadrach. And he was there for 2 years. He saved hundreds and maybe thousands of lives, because we were able to go to Tennessee on one Sunday with a 5-minute thing, and we saw so many things change because of that. So we have to be able to just represent all that God's doing, right? Not just us, but the work of the people as well. All right, let's take another 5-minute break, and then we'll come back and click on through.
Hey Rob, on the first